here, for the most part, is up to speed on where we're at. But I'm going to go ahead and do a real brief introduction as to why we're doing this. Why would we be reading the book of Enoch? Why would we be looking at it? Why would we be countenancing it at all? The short answer is because the Bible brings it up. And the issue is, how do we deal with it? Do we look at it, or do we not look at it? Do we confront it, or do we sweep it under the rug? Up until now, it's an issue that's largely been swept under the rug and ignored. It's something like just something you skip over, or you barely acknowledge at all, or you say something like to the effect of, well, just because he's quoting this much of it or whatever doesn't mean that the whole thing or whatever. But you got to look, I think, at exactly what is there and exactly what the scenario is painted here. We've already talked about the fact that the book of Enoch says things about itself. Enoch says of itself that it is not for his generation, but it is for a generation to come. So in other words, basically, he's painted a scenario here where this book of Enoch is taken out of circulation, according to his own testimony, right? Taken out of circulation because it's not for his generation, but it is for a remote one, which is to come at the time of the removal of the wicked and the ungodly. So the purpose of the book essentially is to be a blessing, right? The words of the blessing of Enoch, right? The words of blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous. So we know who it's for, right? It's for the elect and righteous. So it's for the elect and righteous. So this is who the book is for, right? The words of blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, right? For it's for the day of tribulation. When all the wicked and the godless are to be removed. So this has something to do with the removal of the wicked and the ungodly, right? So right, and there's still some wicked people around, right? So we know that this hasn't quite taken place just yet.
One or two.
So it's for the day. So, but I mean, you're just breaking it down, right? It's supposed to be a blessing. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be for people at the end of time, right? During the day of tribulation, for the purposes of removing the wicked and the ungodly. And again, he stresses the fact that it's not for his generation, but it is for that generation. So in other words, it leaves open the idea that when people ask a question like, well, if it were supposed to be in the Bible, God would have made sure it made it into the Bible, right?
Yeah, no.
It's sort of a presumption that, I mean, as Christians, we added scriptures to the body of scriptures that were already there, and we don't think anything of it because those were handed down to us, and we accept them on the basis of the fact that that's how our canon is laid out. But within the confines of our canon, we have a couple of books that actually deal with the book of Enoch, right? Of course, as we go over just about every time, those are the books of Jude and 2 Peter. Now, a couple of things about Peter that we know already. One of the things is that Peter, symbolically anyway, is given the keys of the kingdom. Right? The question was asked, who do people say that I am? And people gave all kinds of answers, such as one of the prophets raised back to life or whatever. And Peter says, well, he asked Peter direct, he says, well, what about you? What do you say? Right? And then he says, well, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Right? And so when Yeshua answers him, he says, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you. Right? So it's not flesh and blood, but it is what? The Father in heaven. So flesh and blood is essentially contrasted with the heavens. So one of the things we talked about numerous occasions too is just what does it mean when you're talking about what is flesh and blood and what is a heavenly understanding. In other words, what is concrete and what is symbolic, what is literal and what is metaphor, right? A couple of things. One of the things we talked about last week, but I'll bring it up again because it's kind of pertinent. This is kind of the basic understanding. And this comes from out of the Gospel of Thomas, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says that if the spirit, if the flesh came into being, because of the Spirit, all right, then that is a wonder, he says, right? And then he says, if the Spirit came out of the flesh, clear here. Okay, so if the flesh came into being because of the Spirit, that is a wonder. And why? Because what he's saying is that the spiritual level of understanding has made its home in fleshly terminology, right? And so it is a wonder that the Spirit has managed to conceal itself behind earthly things, right? How is the spiritual couched in the fleshly, right? The fact that that can be done and can fly under the radar for 6,000 years and have people not notice it or see it or be able to articulate it, it's a wonder, because how much greater is the Spirit than the flesh? How much more, is the Spirit than the flesh, right? But then he says, but if the Spirit came into being because of the flesh, that is a wonder of wonders. Right? Because to couch the Spirit in the flesh and to conceal the Spirit is itself a wonder, right? But then, if you're able to, from the flesh, unleash the Spirit, right? That is a second wonder. So this is wonder number one, this is wonder number two, right? So it has a precise meaning, right? And then Yeshua says, and yet I marvel, right? I wonder, right? At how this poverty has made its home in such wealth, right? So in other words, he's equating the flesh with poverty, right? And he's equating the Spirit with wealth, right? So in other words, the flesh equals poverty, and the Spirit is wealth. So, in other words, we have a witness in Thomas anyway that the heavenly terms are couched in earthly terminology, and that the earthly terminology he refers to as poverty keeps us at a lower level. But it is something that preserves us into the age of revelation, because again, the flesh does bring forth the Spirit, at least according to that understanding. So, where does that leave us? Okay, well, as we've discussed again just about every single time, in the book of Jude, 14 and 15, I wonder if it works here.
I used to get candy, just throw those away and get some new ones.
Well,
How could that be? Get the green one.
okay. Well, let me get this one. Let's move pointing down. Let me see. Jude 14 and 15, right? So, what does he say? You have to imagine a scenario. Now, look at where we are right now. We are in a world where we have a fixed canon, and that canon is essentially defined by the powers that then were. The people who defined the canon and passed it down to us, they made these decisions on our behalf. if you were to lay all of the potential scriptures before anyone at random, I doubt very seriously that we would all arrive at the same conclusion. But that being said, he's not afraid to cite the source. He says Enoch, the seventh from Adam, that he prophesied, right, of these men. Those who are infiltrating the church, right? Because it says there are certain men crept in unawares, ungodly men, right? So all of these people that Enoch prophesied of were these men, right? So in other words, for Enoch to be a blessing, it has to be restored to us somehow. This is the idea. He already says that he's taken out of circulation to be restored back into the body of the believers. That it exists for the elect on their behalf as a blessing in order to help them with the removal of the wicked and the ungodly. Now, the key is understanding who these men are. One of the things is by Jude owning the book by name. In other words, he's not afraid to mention it by name. If Yeshua quotes, a prophet, he quotes Moses or something, he's not afraid to quote it. Well, in the same way, Jude's not afraid to quote the book of Enoch, right? He's also not afraid to give it its antiquity. He's not afraid to tell you that it's ancient, right? But this is what is affirmed before he makes his quote of the book, right? He gives you the source, so he cites the source. He gives you its antiquity, and of course he tells you that it's prophecy, and that the prophecy pertained to these men. And what do we know about these men, right? Is that these men, right, do not cite the book of Enoch, right? They don't cite it, right? They don't claim that it's ancient, and they don't claim that it's prophecy. And these men won out. This idea that it was not prophecy won out. This idea that it was not ancient won out, right? This idea that the book should not be cited or countenanced or whatever. I mean, how many times do you read that verse and then you go down to some footnote? And unless you're reading a scholarly book, usually that's glossed over. Like my first experience with reading that book was that I was reading the King James Version, and it had the concordance sort of built in, and so it sent me back to Genesis, and I went back to Genesis, and I'm like, well, Enoch's there, but that's not what he's saying. So it was kind of a misdirect. I mean, for what it's worth, it's kind of a misdirect, and that caused a light to come in my eye, especially when I pulled out a couple of other Bibles, and one of them flatly said, literally just stated that it was cited from Enoch 1:9. Boom. It's the least could be said. The least it could be said, right? But it was essentially said. I mean, that was the scholarly consensus. The scholars know this, right? And yet they still deny the book, right? Nobody's out there saying, hey, we should believe this, right? They still deny its antiquity. They say this is written 300 BC, 200 BC, some people later than that, right? They still say it's not prophecy, right? Right? So in other words, they are in agreement with these men, right? So what are we dealing with here? What does the Bible say? Let God be true and every man a liar. Well, if we go with men, we have to play down the source. If we go with men, we have to deny its antiquity. If we go with men, we have to deny its prophetic nature. If we go with these men, right, then we're in the same boat that these people basically built for us. You see what I'm saying? We follow their canon. We follow their estimation. We follow their teachings, essentially. So they won out. And they knowing, I mean literally knowing this, right? After all these years, is anybody still pushing for that? Is anybody still defending Jude? So you're sort of given the question of who do you believe? Do you believe men or do you believe the prophets? Because that's sort of the line of demarcation, right? And that's what the importance of this book is. So why do you harp on it? Why is it such a big deal? Why is it important? Essentially because if you just take it at face value, that's what it's telling you, that the book is ancient, that it's prophetic, and that it applies to these men. And now what does this book say? It says that, well, the quote goes like this: "He cometh with 10,000s, 10,000s of his saints." Right? And who's the book for? The elect, right? For the saints, right? We just read this. So that's the coming, right? In order to do what? To execute judgment. To execute judgment on all. Right? And to condemn all the ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed. Right? So in other words, what does this amount to? This amounts to his power, right? Why? Because he has the power to what? Execute judgment upon all. Power to convict all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, right? And this, of course, is his coming, right? He cometh with 10,000 saints. So in other words, when Peter says that we did not follow cleverly concocted fables, right? When we told you about the power and the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, right? So again, the cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment, the power and the coming. So what he's saying is that when we told you about Enoch 1:9, right? Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, right? We were not following, right, a cleverly concocted fable. And what do we call a cleverly concocted fable on behalf of a prophet in modern day terminology? We call it a pseudepigraphon. Peter is as good as telling you that the book of Enoch is not a pseudepigraphon. It is not a cleverly concocted fable. He's as good as telling you that. And that's what happens when you follow the logic. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with a mechanism. It leaves us with an open door. Because if that's the truth, then what Enoch said about itself, that it was not for his generation, but it was for a future generation, God has left us not one, but two whole books that address the whole subject of the book of Enoch. Two out of 27 books at least focus on that. What appears to have happened, and if you read Jude, you'll understand that he speaks in very particular terms. And then it's commonly understood that the epistle of 2 Peter borrows from Jude. This is what the footnotes will tell you. This is what people, who are in the know about it would basically tell you, as if to say Peter or whoever wrote that book didn't have, enough originality to just, write their own book in their own way. They had to sort of, copy Jude's answers or whatever, without even really explaining why he did that. And then they attributed all these people who are creeping in, they call them everything but what they are. They call them Gnostics maybe, or just false teachers in general. And they keep it all very nebulous. And it is, again, kind of a misdirect. Because if he's saying that the book of Enoch, and he's not afraid to cite it by name, he's essentially countering people who are afraid to cite it. Because, again, what is the question that that's an answer to? Should we read it? I'm reading it, right? Again, that he's the seventh from Adam. What is the question that that is an answer to, right? Is it ancient or not? Jude is answering that question in the affirmative. It is ancient, right? And it is original. And he says that he prophesied. What is the question that is an answer to? The question is it prophecy or not? Right? And so if you understand his preface and you assume that he has a reason for writing those things, right, then that's the inescapable conclusion. Now, Peter makes a number of other points too. I just kind of wanted to underscore the fact that, again, Jude is very particular, so it seems to me that it's more likely, especially just putting the two together, that what happened was they went out preaching from the book of Enoch, which is why Jude is not afraid to quote it and why he's speaking of that particular verse. Why else would he do it? Well, he's saying it because he doesn't believe it. He's saying because he's a strict adherent of the canon, using words like prophesied, giving it the credibility of being ancient and direct and actually from that prophet. He's saying that because other people are saying it's not from him. So he's saying it is. People are saying it's not ancient. So he's saying it is. And people are saying it's not prophetic. So he's saying it is, right? Then he gives you the quote about the power and the coming. And then he makes an apostolic appeal. He's saying this is the thing that the apostles taught. So you can almost see it. So these people out there who don't buy that, they don't believe that, right? What do? They take the book of Jude to who? To Peter. And like, Peter, you're an apostle. He's saying that this is apostolic. What do you say? Right? Now, Peter could have answered a number of ways. He could have answered simply yes or no, right? And that would have settled it. Could have just said yes or no. Yes, Enoch is the seventh from Adam. Yeah, yes, it is prophecy. Yes, we did preach it. Yes, you should go out there and teach it, right? But that would mean that we would have had the book these last 2,000 years, right? Or else Peter would have been rejected and then would have had it at the cost of having 2 Peter in our Bible. See, but if he'd have come out and said just straight up yes, right? Or he could have just said no. But why didn't he say no? I mean, that's an interesting question. If the book is evidently brought to him, is this right or is this wrong? He claims that this is an apostolic teaching, right? What do you say? If the answer had been no, how easy would it have been for Peter to just say no? No, Jude's out of his mind, right? He's making this stuff up on his own, but he's not, right? So, he doesn't answer no. He doesn't answer either one of those ways. He doesn't give you a quote-unquote yes or no answer to that question, but that's evidently the question, because why else is the book brought to him, and why else does he address it? The idea is that he has to couch it in such a way that for 2,000 years it might remain in question because people are thinking about it a certain way. And because they're thinking about it a certain way, they're going to take it upon themselves to deny what Jude is saying. They're going to take it upon themselves to not tell you that that book came from Enoch. They're going to take it upon themselves to not tell you that it's ancient. They're going to tell you that it's 350 BC, 300 BC, whatever. They're going to take it upon themselves to teach otherwise. And he knows this because he knows that book has to be out of circulation until that day. So his not doing it, his non-answer, if you want to call it that, it's a spiritual answer. It's something you can only glean through spiritual insight. But it's not a literal answer that other people would literally see. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So by him affirming that this book is not a pseudepigraphon, he's basically giving apostolic approval of this book and to Jude, but only until such a point as people come to their realization that they've been lied to. And so the whole church is built on this foundation of the canon, the foundation of people's judgments and that's all so that it can be removed. So once you recognize this, you understand that 2,000 years is just right down the tubes as far as what people have taught. Because if that's true, then everything they built their teachings on has lost its roots, has lost its foundation. And so this kind of brings me where I left off, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, or whatever we were at. But if you turn in your books, and if you don't have a book, there may be some on the back counter, I'm not sure. I'll probably have to bring in some more. But if there's not, maybe someone could share. That being said, if you go to, I've got these things in order of the chapters. So if you go down to where it says chapter 93 and then flip the page, or I'm sorry, 91 and flip the page. I guess I left out 93. These are certain sections.
93?
No. Let me correct that.
I see
See where it
92.
says 94, right? Just back up a little bit. Just back up a little bit. So we left off. Well, let me blow through it real quick. Let me just blow through this real quick. This is Enoch addressing Methuselah and his brothers. And he says, "And now, my son Methuselah, call to me all thy brothers, and gather together to me all the sons of my mother. For the word calls me, and the Spirit is poured out upon me." Right? So in what way is the word calling him? Right? Is not the word of God, for example, encapsulated in Jude and 2 Peter, for example? And the Spirit is poured out upon me. Again, the spiritual understanding, what Jude and Peter are saying, you might think, that I may show you everything that shall befall you forever. And thereupon Methuselah went and summoned to him all his brothers, and assembled his relatives, and spake unto all the children of righteousness, and said, Hear ye, sons of Enoch, all the words of your father. And again, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But this is a spiritual hearing. Like you hear on the level of the flesh, but if you also hear on the level of the Spirit, then you hear that other voice, right? And hearken aright to the voice of my mouth. Again, voice is the language, the higher level meaning, the hidden language that's couched in the lower level speaking. For I exhort you and say unto you, beloved, love uprightness and walk therein, and draw not up to uprightness with a double heart. And again, we talked about what a double heart is, right? What does Paul say? That with God, everything is yes. Right? Just flat out yes. He says it's not yes and no. Right? Not yes and no, but it's all yes. So when you go to Jude, for example, just keep into our example where he says that he's the seventh from Adam, and you say no, right? Then you're double-minded because you're split. You're thinking some things are right and some things are wrong. Whether you intend to or not, it is an inevitable consequence of negating. It's an inevitable consequence of negation. So a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and again, because he can never just stand on it. But if you just understand, yes, the book is valid because he's attributing it to him. Yes, the book is ancient because he called him the seventh from Adam. Yes, it's prophecy because he called him a prophet, right? Yes, they did come to speak to us about the power and the coming. You see what I'm saying? That opens the door. So the idea is that you should not follow the double-minded, because the double-minded is all yes and no. Yes, Jude is true. No, Enoch is not. Right? That's sort of.
Sorry, we're working on it.
Okay. Here we go. Walk not in the paths of wickedness. Where am I? Let's skip 2 pages. Yeah. And now I say unto you, the righteous, walk not in the paths of wickedness, nor in the paths of death. And draw not nigh to them, lest ye be destroyed. But seek and choose for yourselves righteousness and an elect life, and walk in the paths of peace, and ye shall live and prosper. And hold fast the words of the thoughts of your hearts, and suffer them not to be effaced from your hearts. For I know that sinners will tempt men to evilly entreat wisdom, so that no place may be found for her. And that's an example of what we just now talked about. And evilly entreating wisdom was basically to say that what God is saying is untrue, to negate what he is saying. That's evilly entreating wisdom. The wisdom is that he's quoting the book and you're not, right? So that's the foolishness. The wisdom is he's saying he's the seventh from Adam when you're not, right? When he's saying that he's a prophet and you're not, right? That's an evilly concocted plan, a scheme on the part of men. And that so no place may be found for her, and that no manner of temptation may diminish. Woe to those who build on unrighteousness and oppression, and lay deceit as a foundation. That's what we were just now talking about. What is the foundation? The foundation is the canon, right? The idea that upon that is built the church of man. And that's the deceit that they have laid as a foundation. For they shall be suddenly overthrown, and they shall have no peace. And woe to those who build their houses with sin, for from all their foundations they shall be overthrown. and by the sword, again, of the word shall they fall. And I guess we'll leave it off there, but you can see the point is, if the idea is that everything that they've built has been built on a foundation that is not solid, is not sound, then you don't have to go back and argue point by point. You don't have to go back and try to fight them on every front, right? They built everything they are on a lie. If you undercut that lie, then that just takes care of everything. It's the whole house of cards. It's the whole fall of Babylon if you do that.
Pages from the past, secrets unseen. Enoch's words, visions untold, they gleam. Restored to humanity through Peter and Jude. Dark mysteries unfold. In shadows we brood. In the ink, ancient lost tales resound. Forbidden knowledge, whispers that astound. Enoch's prophecy, the path to traverse, unveiling truths, the fates we traverse. Enoch's prophecy, a path to traverse, unveiling truths, the fates we traverse. Enoch's whispers echo through the night, unveiling secrets lost in ancient light. The book awakens, dark and magic, in the shadows we run, seeking to atone. Mysteries untold, ancient tales unfold. Lost in a world of secrets never told. Enoch's words, written in the night, unveiling truths, piercing through the light. Whispers in the dark, secrets in disguise. Enoch's mystic pen, revealing ancient lies, unveiling angels fall, forbidden knowledge lost. The book of Enoch, visions from the past, shadowed mysteries, secrets never seen, unexposed, revealing what has been. Enoch's prophecy echoes from the past, unleashing demons, the darkness that will last.
In hushed tones, the scholars speak of prophecies and power they seek. It's coming back, the ancient scrolls, secrets of old, they will unfold. dark and bold. I can't blame them for seeking deep for lore that heaven couldn't keep. Shrouded tales now in the light. Shadow past it meets the present. Shadow past it meets the present. Watch it rise, the book of ages, turning fast the mystic pages.